What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. Thanks so much for being here today. We've got a thrilling story lined up, and we hope you love it. Let's jump in. The bell rang, signaling the end of another school day. I gathered my papers, nodding goodbye to the last few students shuffling out of my classroom. 20 years of teaching high school English, and the routine never changed. But lately, that routine had become a lifeline, the only constant in a world that felt increasingly off-kilter. I drove home, the same route I'd taken for years. The modest two-story house came into view, a home that once held dreams and warmth. Now it felt like a facade, much like my marriage to Sylvia. Sylvia. Even her name left a bitter taste in my mouth. We drifted apart, two strangers sharing a space. Her dreams had outgrown our simple life, while I remained content with what we'd built together. Or so I thought. I entered the quiet house, noticing Sylvia's purse on the counter. She must be upstairs. I loosened my tie, heading to the kitchen for a much-needed drink. That's when I saw a crumpled receipt peeking out of her purse. Normally, I wouldn't pry, but something instinct maybe made me reach for it. As I smoothed out the paper, my heart sank. The Regal Hotel, a luxury suite, booked by Alejandro Meyer. Alejandro, the name echoed in my mind, the charming architect who'd been hanging around Sylvia lately. I'd seen the way she looked at him, but I'd dismissed it as harmless admiration. Clearly, I'd been a fool. I clutched the receipt, my knuckles white. The front door opened, and Sylvia's voice rang out. "Gordon, you're home early." I turned, facing her as she entered the kitchen. She looked radiant, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders. But now, all I saw was deception. "What's this?" I held up the receipt, my voice steadier than I felt. Sylvia's eyes widened for a moment before narrowing. "You went through my things? Answer the question, Sylvia." She laughed, a sound that cut through me like glass. "Oh, darling, are you jealous?" I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. This wasn't the woman I'd married. This creature before me was a stranger, cold and cruel. "Jealous," I repeated, my tone flat. Sylvia sauntered closer, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "You should be. Alejandro knows how to treat a woman. He doesn't bore her with talk of lesson plans and parent-teacher conferences. So you're admitting it? You're having an affair?" She shrugged, reaching for the receipt. I pulled it away, and her eyes flashed with anger. "What did you expect, Gordon? Look at you, a high school teacher with delusions of grandeur. Alejandro is going places. He can give me the life I deserve." Each word was a dagger, but I refused to show her how deeply they cut. "And what life is that, Sylvia? One built on lies and deceit." She laughed again, the sound grating on my nerves. "Oh, please, spare me the moral high ground. You're just upset because you can't satisfy me anymore." I took a step back, suddenly seeing our entire marriage in a new light. Every late night, every secretive phone, call it all made sense now. "How long?" I asked, my voice low. Sylvia smirked, clearly enjoying my pain. "Long enough. And tonight, I'm meeting him again. He's booked the penthouse suite. Don't wait up, darling. I'll be too busy being treated like a queen." She turned to leave, but I grabbed her arm. "Sylvia, think about what you're doing. We can work this out." She yanked her arm away, her eyes cold. "Work what out? There's nothing left to save, Gordon. You're pathetic, clinging to the sham of a marriage. I want more, and Alejandro can give it to me." I watched her walk away, my world crumbling around me. The front door slammed, and I was left alone in the silence of our once happy home. Hours passed. I sat in the darkness, the receipt still clutched in my hand. As the night wore on, my shock turned to anger, then to a cold, calculating rage. Sylvia had made her choice. Now it was time to make mine. I grabbed my keys and wallet, leaving behind the house that no longer felt like home. I spent the night in my car, parked at the school, my mind racing with plans. Sylvia wanted to play games? Fine, but she'd soon learn that I wasn't the pushover she thought I was. As dawn broke, I made my decision. Sylvia had shattered our life together. Now, I would shatter her illusions of grandeur, and I would do it without mercy. The bank opened at 9 a.m. sharp. I was the first customer through the door. My resolve was already strong by a sleepless night of planning. "Good morning, Mr. Mayo." The teller greeted me with a smile. "How can I help you today?" I forced a pleasant expression. "I need to make some changes to my accounts." 30 minutes later, I walked out, our joint account emptied, and Sylvia's credit cards canceled. It was amazing how quickly one could dismantle a life built over decades. Next stop, the lawyer's office. I'd called in a favor with an old friend who owed me. By noon, I had divorce papers drawn up, the ink still wet on the signature line. Back at the house, I gathered a few essentials: clothes, important documents, the woodworking tools that had been my solace over the years. As I packed, my eyes fell on our wedding photo. Sylvia's smile, once so captivating, now seemed like a mask hiding the deceit that had always lurked beneath. I placed the divorce papers on the kitchen table, along with a note: "Queen of the streets now. Enjoy your pauper's palace." Short, cruel, and to the point, just like her betrayal. As I loaded my car, Mrs. Henderson from next door called out, "Everything all right, Gordon?" Sylvia left in quite a hurry last night. I plastered on a smile. "Just fine, Mrs. Henderson. Sylvia's visiting a friend. I'm heading out for a bit myself." The lie came easily. Let Sylvia deal with the fallout when she returned. I drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, checking in under a false name. As I settled into the sparse room, my phone buzzed. Sylvia's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call, a satisfaction settling over me. Hours passed. My phone lit up repeatedly calls, text voicemails. I ignored them all, imagining Sylvia's panic as she discovered her new reality. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I listened to the first voicemail. "Gordon, what the hell have you done?" Sylvia's voice was shrill, panicked. "The cards aren't working. The account's empty. Call me back immediately." I deleted it without a second thought. The next message played automatically. "This isn't funny, Gordon. You can't do this to me. I'll tell everyone what a controlling bastard you are. You'll regret this." Her threats washed over me, leaving me cold. She'd already taken everything that mattered. What more could she possibly do? The final message was different. Alejandro's smooth voice filled the room. "Gordon, it's Alejandro. Look, I know you're upset, but let's handle this like men. Call me back, and we can discuss this civilly." I laughed bitterly. Civilly? As if there was anything civil about stealing another man's wife. I deleted all the messages, then blocked both their numbers. Let them stew in their own mess. As night fell, I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the blank TV screen. The initial rush of revenge was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache. But I pushed it aside. This was just the beginning. Sylvia and Alejandro thought they'd played me for a fool, but they'd soon learn that I was capable of so much more than they'd ever imagined. I pulled out my laptop, fingers flying over the keys as I began to plan the next phase of my retaliation. Sylvia had connections in this town, friends in high places, but I had something far more valuable: 20 years of quiet observation and a mind for strategy that no one had ever bothered to notice. By dawn, I had a plan. It wasn't enough to just walk away. No, I would dismantle their world piece by piece, just as they'd shattered mine. The next few weeks passed in a blur of calculated moves and quiet manipulations. I returned to work, playing the role of the dedicated teacher by day. But in the evenings, I set my plan in motion. It started small. A concerned comment to a mutual friend over coffee. "I'm worried about Sylvia," I confided, my voice low. "She's been under so much stress lately." acting erratically. Sarah, always eager for gossip, leaned in. Oh, how so? I sighed. The picture of a concerned husband. Mood swings, impulsive behavior. I'm trying to be supportive, but I trailed off, letting her imagination fill in the blanks. Sarah patted my hand. Poor dear, both of you. I'll keep an eye on her, make sure she's okay. I nodded gratefully, hiding my satisfaction. The seed was planted. At school, I overheard two teachers discussing local architects for a home renovation. What about Alejandro Meyer? One asked. I've heard good things. I couldn't resist. Careful with that one, I warned, keeping my tone casual. I've heard he's got a reputation for getting overly involved with his clients, especially the married ones. Their eyes widened, and I knew the rumor would spread like wildfire. Weeks passed, and I watched as my carefully orchestrated whispers took root. Sylvia, once the darling of our social circle, found herself increasingly isolated. Invitations dried up, friends became distant, and Alejandro, his golden boy reputation began to tarnish. I ran into Sylvia at the grocery store, her cart filled with cheap wine and TV dinners. She looked haggard, her designer clothes wrinkled. Gordon, she hissed, grabbing my arm. What have you been saying about me? I gently removed her hand, my face a mask of confusion. I haven't said anything, Sylvia. Are you feeling all right? You look unwell. Her eyes narrowed. Don't play innocent. My friends are avoiding me. Alejandro's clients are canceling. This has your fingerprints all over it. I shrugged, keeping my voice level. Sounds like you're having a rough time. Maybe you should talk to someone about that paranoia. She opened her mouth to retort, but I was already walking away, leaving her fuming in the frozen food aisle. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Jocelyn, a local influencer and one of Sylvia's closest friends, approached me after a school event. Gordon, can we talk? Her voice was hushed, her eyes darting around nervously. I nodded, leading her to a quiet corner. What's on your mind, Jocelyn? She bit her lip. It's about Sylvia. I'm worried about her. She's been saying some concerning things. About you. I raised an eyebrow, the picture of innocence. Oh, Jocelyn looked uncomfortable. She's talking about exposing you. Says you're abusive, controlling. But Gordon, I've known you both for years. It doesn't add up. I let out a heavy sigh. Jocelyn, I appreciate your concern. Sylvia's been going through a lot lately. I'm afraid she's not thinking clearly. So it's not true? I met her gaze steadily. What do you think? She studied me for a moment, then nodded. I thought as much. Don't worry, Gordon. I won't let her spread these lies. As Jocelyn walked away, I allowed myself a small smile. Sylvia's last desperate attempt to turn the tables had backfired spectacularly. That night, I sat in my new apartment, a glass of whiskey in hand. My phone buzzed with a news alert. A local gossip column had run a story about a scandalous affair between a prominent architect and a married woman. No names were mentioned, but the implications were clear. I raised my glass in a mock toast. Checkmate, my dear. The game wasn't over, not by a long shot. But as I watched Sylvia and Alejandro's carefully constructed world crumble, I felt a surge of satisfaction. They'd underestimated me, dismissed me as a simple, naive teacher. Now they were learning just how wrong they'd been. I sat at my desk, grading papers, when my phone buzzed with a notification. Another post from Jocelyn, Sylvia's influencer friend. I clicked on it, my jaw clenching as I read. Sometimes the strongest women are the ones who suffer in silence. Hashtag stay strong, hashtag hidden truths. I scrolled through the comments. People were already speculating, some even mentioning Sylvia by name. Jocelyn was playing her part well, I had to admit. A knock on my classroom door interrupted my thoughts. It was Principal Hawkins. Gordon, got a minute? I nodded, gesturing for him to enter. Of course, sir. What can I do for you? Hawkins closed the door behind him, his expression grave. There's been some talk about you and Sylvia. Is everything all right? I met his gaze steadily. Sylvia and I are going through a divorce. It's unfortunate, but these things happen. That's not all I'm hearing, Gordon. There are rumors. I cut him off. With all due respect, sir, my personal life is my own business. I can assure you it won't affect my work here. Hawkins studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, but if you need anything... I appreciate that, I said, effectively ending the conversation. As soon as Hawkins left, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. Hello, a gruff voice answered. Frank, it's Gordon Mayo. Remember that favor you owe me? Frank chuckled. How could I forget? What do you need, Teach? I smiled. I need you to dig up some dirt on Jocelyn Carter, the social media influencer, and I need it fast. Consider it done. I'll call you when I have something. I hung up, my mind already racing with plans. Sylvia and Jocelyn thought they could destroy me with lies. They were about to learn a harsh lesson in consequences. The next day, I volunteered to chaperone the school dance. As I helped set up decorations, I made sure to chat with the students, asking about their lives, their hopes. I knew word would get back to their parents about the kind, caring Mr. Mayo. One of the students, Emily, approached me hesitantly. Mr. Mayo, is it true what they're saying online about you and your wife? I put on my best concerned teacher face. Emily, you shouldn't believe everything you read online. Sometimes people say hurtful things when they're angry or hurt themselves. The important thing is to always treat others with kindness and respect. Don't you agree? Emily nodded, looking relieved. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Mr. Mayo. As she walked away, I noticed several other students watching our interaction. Good. The seeds of doubt were being planted. That evening, as I was leaving the school, my phone rang. It was Frank. Gordon, you're going to want to hear this. Turns out your friend Jocelyn isn't as squeaky clean as she pretends to be. I've got emails proving she's been taking payments to promote products without disclosing it. Illegal as hell. Oh, and there's more. She's been fudging her follower numbers, buying fake accounts. Her whole image is built on lies. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Send me everything you've got, Frank, and make sure it's untraceable. Already done. Check your encrypted email. I thanked him and hung up, a plan already forming in my mind. Jocelyn's campaign against me was gaining traction, but not for long. I had the ammunition I needed to bring her down, and with her, Sylvia's entire narrative. As I drove home, I couldn't help but smile. They thought they were so clever, trying to paint me as the villain, but they had no idea who they were really dealing with. By the time I was done, they'd wish they'd never crossed Gordon Mayo. The fallout was swift and brutal. I'd leaked the evidence of Jocelyn's fraudulent activities to several reputable journalists, and within days, the story broke. Her carefully crafted image crumbled overnight. I was in the teacher's lounge when the news hit. The TV was on, showing Jocelyn's tearful apology video. I never meant to deceive anyone, she sobbed on screen. I got caught up in the pressure of maintaining my image. Turn that garbage off, muttered one of my colleagues, reaching for the remote. I stopped him. Wait, I think we should watch this. It's important to stay informed about the influence social media has on our students. As we watched, I noticed the sideways glances from my coworkers. They were connecting the dots, realizing that Jocelyn was the same person who'd been spreading rumors about me. After the broadcast, Sarah, the English teacher, approached me. Gordon, I owe you an apology. I may have believed some of the things I heard about you. I should have known better. I waved off her apology. No need, Sarah. We all make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them. She nodded, looking relieved. You're a good man, Gordon. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As Sarah walked away, I allowed myself a small smile. The tide was turning. Later that day, As I was leaving school, I spotted a familiar figure storming towards me. Sylvia, her face contorted with rage. "You bastard!" she screamed, drawing the attention of nearby students and parents. "What did you do? How did you get that information about Jocelyn?" I remained calm, aware of our audience. "Sylvia, I think you need to calm down. This is neither the time nor the place for this discussion." "Don't tell me to calm down," she shrieked. "You ruined everything. You're supposed to be destroyed, humiliated. How are you still standing?" I noticed phones being pulled out, people recording the scene. "Perfect. Sylvia," I said, loud enough for others to hear, "I'm sorry you're going through a difficult time, but making a scene like this isn't going to help anyone. Why don't we talk about this privately, like adults?" Her eyes widened with fury. "You condescending prick. You think you're so much better than me? I'll show you." She lunged at me, her nails raking across my face. I stumbled back, shocked by the sudden attack. "Mrs. Mayo." Principal Hawkins' voice boomed across the parking lot. "That's enough." As Hawkins rushed over, I touched my cheek, feeling the sting of the scratches. Sylvia stood there, breathing heavily, seeming to realize what she'd done. I didn't mean." "Save it." Hawkins cut her off. "Mr. Mayo, are you all right? Do you want to press charges?" I shook my head, playing the role of the magnanimous victim. "No, that won't be necessary. I'm sure Sylvia is just upset. Perhaps she needs help, not punishment." Sylvia's face crumpled, a mix of anger and despair. As Hawkins led her away, I could feel the sympathy of the onlookers. They'd seen everything, the unhinged woman attacking the calm, forgiving teacher. That night, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Alejandro. "Gordon." His voice was tense. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I replied coolly. "This has gone too far. My clients are pulling out. My reputation is in tatters." "Call off your dogs, Gordon." "What do you want?" I laughed humorlessly. "What do I want?" "I want you to understand the consequences of your actions, Alejandro. You thought you could take my wife, destroy my life, and walk away unscathed? You're learning a valuable lesson about karma." "Please," he begged, his smooth confidence gone. "I'll do anything. Just make it stop." "Anything?" I mused. "All right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to publicly admit to your affair with Sylvia. You're going to tell everyone how you manipulated her, used her, and then you're going to leave town. For good." There was a long pause. "And if I do this, you'll stop?" "You have my word," I said, knowing full well that my campaign against him was already self-sustaining. The community would do the rest. "Fine," he agreed, defeat in his voice. "I'll do it." As I hung up, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. Sylvia and Alejandro had tried to destroy me, to paint me as a villain. Instead, they'd orchestrated their own downfall. The next day, Alejandro's confession hit social media. The backlash was immediate and brutal. His business, already struggling, collapsed entirely. Sylvia, now exposed as the willing participant in an affair, found herself shunned by the very community she tried to turn against me. I watched it all unfold from a distance, playing the role of the dignified, wronged husband. The sympathy and support I received were overwhelming. People who'd once looked at me with suspicion now treated me with respect and admiration. As I stood in front of my class, teaching about the complexities of human nature and literature, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Sylvia and Alejandro had underestimated me, seen only the mild-mannered teacher. They never realized that I could play the game better than they ever could. I thought I'd seen the last of Alejandro, but like a bad penny, he turned up again. This time, he came at me through the school, aiming to destroy the career I'd built over 2 decades. The first hint of trouble came when Principal Hawkins called me into his office one morning. His face was grim as I took a seat across from him. "Gordon, we need to talk," he said, his voice heavy. "There have been some allegations made against you." I leaned forward, my expression neutral. What kind of allegations? Hawkins sighed, sliding a folder across the desk. Misconduct, Gordon. Serious stuff. A colleague and several students have come forward with complaints. I opened the folder, scanning the contents. My blood boiled as I read the fabricated stories, the exaggerated accounts of minor classroom incidents twisted into something sinister. This is nonsense, I said, closing the folder. Who's behind this? The board is taking it seriously, Gordon. I'm sorry, but effective immediately. You're suspended pending an investigation. I stood up, my mind racing. This is Alejandro's doing, isn't it? He's manipulating people, trying to ruin me. Hawkins shook his head. I can't discuss the details. Please, Gordon, just go home. We'll be in touch. As I left the office, I saw Jared Livingston, a younger teacher I'd never been particularly close to. He avoided my gaze, hurrying past me. That's when I knew he was involved. I spent the next few days at home, fielding calls from concerned colleagues and friends. The news had spread quickly, and I could feel the tide of public opinion shifting against me once again. Then, unexpectedly, I received a visit from Marshall John, a veteran teacher and one of the few people I considered a true friend. Gordon, he said as I opened the door, we need to talk. I ushered him in, and we sat in my living room. Marshall looked troubled, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by something more serious. I know you didn't do what they're saying, he began, and I think I have proof. My eyebrows shot up. What kind of proof? Marshall pulled out his phone. I overheard Jared talking to someone the other day. He sounded scared, like he was being forced into something. I recorded it. Listen. He played the recording. Jared's voice came through clearly. I can't do this anymore. It's not right. Gordon's never done anything wrong. No, you don't understand. He's threatening me, saying he'll expose. Look, I don't care about the money anymore. This has gone too far. I leaned back, a smile on my face. Alejandro. It has to be him. Marshall nodded. That's what I figured. What are you going to do? I stood up, my resolve getting stronger. I'm going to end this once and for all. Can you get me a meeting with the school board? Marshall grinned. Consider it done. The next day, I stood before the school board, Marshall by my side. I played the recording, watching as their expressions changed from skepticism to shock. Mr. Mayo, the board president said after a long silence, we owe you an apology. It's clear you've been the victim of a malicious campaign. I nodded, my voice steady. I appreciate that, but I think we need to address the root of the problem. Alejandro Meyer has been orchestrating this smear campaign. He manipulated Jared and those students. I believe he should be held accountable. The board members exchanged glances. We'll look into it, Mr. Mayo. For now, consider your suspension lifted. We'll issue a public apology and clear your name. As we left the meeting, Marshall clapped me on the back. You did it, Gordon. Alejandro's finished. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Not quite yet, but he will be. True to their word, the school board issued a public apology. The community rallied around me, outraged at how I'd been treated. Alejandro, his last desperate attempt to destroy me having backfired spectacularly, went to ground. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Alejandro had tried to take everything from me. Now, I would return the favor. Despite my victory at the school, I still had one last battle to face. The divorce court. Sylvia, emboldened by the state's no-fault divorce laws, swaggered into the courtroom like she owned it. As the judge read out the settlement, I kept my face impassive. Sylvia, on the other hand, couldn't hide her glee. Mr. Mayo, as per the state laws, your wife is entitled to half of your joint assets, the judge declared. This includes your savings, pension, and property. Sylvia leaned over, her voice a venomous whisper. Hear that, Gordon? I win after all. I said nothing, merely nodding at the judge's words. Inside, however, My mind was already several steps ahead. As we left the courthouse, Sylvia couldn't resist one last dig. She strutted down the steps, her newly acquired wealth practically radiating from her. "Oh, Gordon," she called back, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Don't look so glum. At least you still have your precious teaching job. Though I can't imagine the pay will cover much more than a shabby little apartment now." I watched her go, my expression unchanging. Alejandro stood at the bottom of the steps, looking uncomfortable. He'd kept his distance throughout the proceedings, no doubt aware of how precarious his own position was. Sylvia reached him, linking her arm through his. "Come on, darling. Let's go celebrate my newfound fortune." Alejandro hesitated, glancing up at me. I met his gaze coolly, and he quickly looked away. "Actually, Sylvia, I have a meeting. Maybe another time." Sylvia's face fell, but she quickly recovered. "Fine. More for me then." As they walked away, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. "Martin, it's Gordon. Remember that favor you owe me? I'm calling it in." Martin Maynard, a smooth-talking con man I'd once helped out of a tight spot, chuckled on the other end of the line. Well, the straight-laced teacher finally needs my particular set of skills. "What's the game, Gordon?" I outlined my plan, watching as Sylvia climbed into a taxi, no doubt headed for the nearest luxury boutique. "Can you do it?" I asked. "For you, Gordon, consider it done. This Sylvia won't know what hit her." Over the next few weeks, I watched from afar as Martin worked his magic. He approached Sylvia at her favorite upscale bar, playing the part of a successful entrepreneur to perfection. I sat at the other end of the bar, nursing a drink, as Martin regaled Sylvia with tales of exclusive investment opportunities and promises of easy wealth. "You see, my dear," Martin was saying, his charm turned up to 11. "These opportunities are usually reserved for the upper echelon of society. But I see something special in you. A woman of your sophistication deserves to be among the elite." Sylvia preened under his attention. "Well, I always knew I was destined for greater things. My ex-husband could never understand that." Martin leaned in conspiratorially. "Ah, yes. Small-minded men often fail to recognize true potential. But you, Sylvia, you have a gift. I can help you turn that settlement into a fortune that will make your ex-husband's head spin." I hid my smile behind my glass. Sylvia was falling for it hook, line, and sinker. Over the following months, Martin gradually introduced Sylvia to higher-stakes ventures. I kept tabs on her through my network of contacts, watching as she threw herself into this new world of supposed luxury and exclusivity. One evening, I received a call from Martin. "Gordon, my friend, I think it's time for the grand finale. Our dear Sylvia has developed quite the taste for high-stakes gambling. What do you say we introduce her to a game she can't possibly win?" I hesitated for a moment, then steeled myself. "Do it." The next week, I stood outside a high-end casino, watching as Sylvia entered, dressed to the nines. Martin had set up a private game, promising unimaginable riches to the winner. Hours later, Sylvia stumbled out, her face ashen. I stepped out of the shadows, startling her. "Gordon, what are you doing here?" I shrugged. "Just out for a walk." "You look upset, Sylvia." "Rough night." She glared at me, her earlier bravado gone. "This doesn't concern you." "I'm fine." I nodded, my voice neutral. "Of course." "Well, good night then." As I walked away, I heard her burst into tears. But I didn't look back. Sylvia had made her choices. Now she would live with the consequences. The fallout from Sylvia's gambling addiction was swift and merciless. Within months, she had lost everything: the divorce settlement, her social standing, even her designer wardrobe. I heard through the grapevine that she'd been reduced to selling her prized possessions just to cover her basic expenses. Her once vibrant social life had evaporated, fair weather friends abandoning her as quickly as her money had. One day, I ran into Sarah, the English teacher at the local coffee shop. "Gordon," she said, her voice hushed. "Did you hear about Sylvia? They say she's living in some run-down apartment on the edge of town. Can you believe it?" I shook my head, keeping my expression neutral. "Life can change quickly, Sarah. It's a shame." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "You're a better person than I am, Gordon. After everything she put you through, I don't know if I could be so understanding." As I left the coffee shop, I allowed myself a small smile. Understanding? No. But satisfied? Absolutely. Weeks passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. My reputation at the school had never been stronger, with students and parents alike singing my praises. The community, having witnessed my grace under pressure, rallied around me. One sunny Saturday, as I was working in my garden, I noticed a figure approaching my house. As they got closer, I realized it was Melody, the kind-hearted librarian I'd grown close to in recent months. "Gordon," she called out, waving. "I hope I'm not interrupting." I stood up, brushing dirt from my hands. "Not at all, Melody. What brings you by?" She held up a book. "I found that novel you were asking about. Thought I'd drop it off." I invited her in, and we spent the afternoon talking books, life, and everything in between. As the sun began to set, Melody stood to leave. "This was lovely, Gordon," she said, her smile warm. "We should do it again sometime." I nodded, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. "I'd like that." As I watched her go, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future. The next day, I decided to finish a project I'd been working on for weeks, a beautifully crafted wooden box. As I applied the final coat of varnish, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. Sylvia's betrayal, Alejandro's schemes, the battles I'd fought and won. It had been a long, hard road, but I'd come out the other side stronger. Once the varnish had dried, I went to my desk and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a letter Sylvia had sent months ago, full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. I'd never opened it. I placed the letter in the box, closed the lid, and locked it. Then I went out to the backyard, dug a small hole, and buried the box. As I patted down the earth, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. The past was where it belonged, buried and forgotten. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees, and looked out over my garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. In that moment, I felt truly free. Sylvia, Alejandro, the pain and betrayal they caused, all of it was behind me now. I had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side. As I walked back into my house, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The man looking back at me wasn't the same one who had discovered that damning receipt all those months ago. This man was stronger, wiser, and unafraid of whatever challenges life might throw his way. I smiled at my reflection, then turned away. The future was waiting, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what it held. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there. Subscribe to the Cheating Tales Lab for more original and exclusive stories. We hope you enjoy this one. Let's begin. I trudged up the driveway, my wheeled suitcase bumping along behind me. The porch light flickered on as I approached.